the theme of this podcast is the 5 ways to wellbeing, and it's a very simple piece of research that says if you exhibit these 5 ways, then you can promote positive mental wellbeing.
Yes.
And the first one of the 5 ways is to connect with other people. And how do you exhibit that in your professional life and also your personal life?
So I think obviously with the professional life, if you look back to prior to the pandemic, for example, maybe people sort of took for granted what that meant, and I feel like when the pandemic hit and we were working from home and we had all of the the restrictions in place, it became such a missed thing. I mean, I struggled with it quite a lot, and I know other people that that did, and you still had that human connection in terms of the platforms that you used to do your meetings and stuff, but in actual fact, when that pandemic ended and everyone started sort of getting back to some normality, I think everyone, and I definitely realised how much I'd missed it and how much it had affected me, because I'm one of them people who thrive off being in person with someone and having that connection, and I take a lot from people's reactions and how they are around you, and I sort of take that and it sort of adjusts the way I am. And it's difficult to get that over, a screen, for example, isn't it?
So it is. I don't really like Zoom or Teams. I'm always I've got a preference for in-person meetings, and I too get a lot of energy from other people. So, did you find that your mental health deteriorated during the pandemic when you suddenly couldn't connect with people in person?
I did, yeah, and the scary thing about it, I would say, is that I didn't quite realise it was happening at the time, because it was bit by bit, and it was something that everyone really suddenly had to just get used to, and I don't think I quite felt the impact of it until we were coming out of that, and it was sort of getting back to normal and civilization and all that interaction again, and I found that I wasn't maybe quite who I was prior to that. So it did impact me, yeah, but I couldn't really understand how much actually until I came out of it.
If you're someone that gets energy from other people, I imagine that you're in your element in a sales environment in person. So how did you react as a salesperson during COVID when suddenly everything was taken online?
Again, it was the relationships that already existed. Maybe wasn't so bad, because that relationship's already there and it's built, and it was more the new connections and trying to build on the relationships and actually maintain the ones that you already had as well. And I found that quite difficult, because I didn't feel personally that I could get that energy through the computer screen. Not to say any of the calls were bad or negative. We weren't conversing any differently than what we usually would, but that in-person energy that people sort of, put out was just not there, and I don't feel you could get that on a screen. So, I did struggle with that quite a bit.
So, the first way to wellbeing that I'm going to talk about with you, Eddie, is be active. You're really into your CrossFit.
Yeah, you'd say that. Yeah.
I see all of your protein bars in the fridge at work.
Yeah.
Always making sure you're getting the right macros in. I think that's the right technical term.
That is. I know I've explained it to you well. If you're reciting it back to me.
I've clearly worked at Consalia long enough to know the lingo on myprotein.com or wherever you buy from, Eddie. But,
good stuff, man. Nice.
But I always think it's easy to be active in fair weather situations, because a lot of us do have that as a hobby. But what role does let's say your CrossFit, what role does that play when you're going through a challenging time at work? So let's say you're under pressure, you're dealing with deadlines. What role does it play then?
So I think, well, first and foremost, 5 ways to wellbeing. Luke, great initiative to bring that to Consalia. I think it's definitely something that we want to keep talking about for sure. amongst the sales community. But when it comes to, you know, being active with CrossFit and how that fits into my world, I think I come into the office regularly, mostly, you know, 9 to 6 every day. So arguably I'm spending most of my time at the office than I am at home. Obviously that's I think that's the same for most people who are working in, you know, office jobs and stuff. And when you're in that environment where you're working constantly, and, you know, I'm sure it is the same for other places, but sometimes you can feel like you're going non-stop. Especially in like the profession that we're in, like sales and marketing. There's always things to do, there's always targets to reach, etc. Sometimes you can feel like you're getting closed. Well, especially for me, I feel like sometimes I'm getting closed in that environment the longer I stay. So arguably I should be working from home a little bit more. But when it comes to actually stepping foot into the CrossFit gym that I go to, it's like this whole sense of relief where I can just kind of, I don't know, take out, I wouldn't say frustrations, because I really get frustrated, but it's a nice release from the everyday, right? You know, for about 8 hours I'm staring at a screen, looking at graphs and charts and, you know, editing videos and podcasts, etc. I'll probably be editing this as well, you know. But when I'm in the gym, in the CrossFit gym, and I'm lifting the weights, doing some burpees, you just forget about everything, right? You get into that mode where, like, actually, it's such a different feeling to what I was feeling an hour before I got to the gym, right? And I think that's so important for us to do. You know, I was speaking to my other half about it recently, and although, like, it might take up a bit of time in the evening, it's actually so important for us to do, so that we kind of bring ourselves back to that kind of healthy mental well-being state. You know, there was once a time where I didn't go for a whole week. I can't remember why that was. I don't know if I was just injured or something. But then you have your everyday stresses, which can sometimes feel non-stop. And if you don't have that release, especially in my kind of, from my perspective, you just feel like everything's a lot more overwhelming. So it's like a nice little break from the everyday that I feel that, you know, especially works for me, for sure.
Yeah, I see that. So the change of scenery seems to be so important. It's so being active might take us to an actual different physical location, and that might have in itself some psychological benefits. To give us a variety in life that without being active we wouldn't go to, let's say, the cricket field or the football pitch, or we wouldn't go to the CrossFit gym. I know you didn't learn much in physics or chemistry in GCSE.
No, because I copied you.
But yeah, so not much self-sufficient learning in those classes. but you know, one thing I know about you is you love learning new skills.
Yeah.
You do go from, you do pick up new ideas and you like to try new things. For example, like when you're into rock climbing for a little bit and so forth. How does that help your mental well-being when you pick up a new skill, or in fact it could be reading a book? What does learning do for you, for your brain?
When like you mentioned back in GCSEs, I thought in my immature brain, I thought I just need to get this done and move through. And I think it was kind of a missed opportunity, to be honest, because my brain now, as it's developed, I love learning. More specifically about my industry, so we're in the perfumery industry, and it's hundreds of thousands, millions of different opportunities and fragrances we could create or brands that we could work with. And that's what I love learning. I love learning on content. I love learning my job. I love learning the ins and outs of my job and the different roles, there are hundreds of roles within my industry, and I've only just scratched the surface with regards to what everybody does. So learning every single day is really, really important for me. When I was younger, I assumed a lot about the world, and I assumed that I was right about a lot of those things. But learning kind of makes me a little bit more humble, because there's so much in the world that we don't know. So every single day that I get to learn, specifically with regards to my industry, is amazing, and I love it. Outside of work, I just think it's really important, because otherwise I just focus on work all day. I'll keep doing emails. I'll keep doing everything. Learning takes you away, and it can be something completely different. You were mentioning rock climbing. Rock climbing was really cool for me. The cycling that I took up earlier on this year as well, and I became a full lycra boy. It was really embarrassing for my family, and I loved it, because there's no limit in all of these topics. When you're learning, or you've done it before, when you're looking at like philosophy and things like that, realistically there's no limit. The only limit is your brain. There's endless books, there's endless infinite amount of information that you can pick up, and that's what's quite nice. There's no definitive end to learning. And I think we all look for a definitive end in work, but with learning, there is none. I'm never going to be the best rock climber. I'm never going to be the best cyclist. Equally, I'm probably never going to be the best person in my industry, or the best sales director in my industry. And that's a lovely thing to have, because it doesn't limit your brain, and then you don't get depressed when you don't hit that limit, and you don't get low. You don't get low when you're not learning as quick as everybody else, or you're not the fastest person to read a book. That's what I love about it, the undefined ending to learning.
The 5 ways to wellbeing suggests that giving is actually really good for mental well-being.
Yeah.
For me, what makes giving so good or so helpful to mental well-being is I'm not stuck in myself.
Yeah.
So if I'm thinking about another person, then I feel, for example, an absence of selfishness, a real negative emotion that can dictate, certainly in my experience, can dictate my life. So when I'm giving to someone else, whether that's money, time, or resources, whatever it might be, I actually feel quite well. Now, what's your experience around that? Do you find that altruism makes you feel better?
Yeah, I think that, as I said, sort of doing small acts of kindness is, in a way, it's giving, whether that's even just a smile, it can be so small, it doesn't really have to cost you anything. Like being polite to Lady in Tesco today, to go back to it, I didn't have to do that. A lot of people choose not to do that, and that's all right. They might be in their own heads that day, they might be having a really rubbish day and very focused on what's going on in their sort of internal world. But I think that there's some kind of statistic about it, that people that do something nice for someone every day are, X amount more happy, whatever it is. But I think, you can do the smallest of things, even if it's, getting some food for someone. I made sausage rolls for a sales meeting we had the other day, and, the sales guys haven't stopped talking about them, and it's not anything special. It took half an hour of my time. I was quite happy pottering on, watching some rubbish on Netflix or something. It's those small things that then they do make you feel so much better, because then you're suddenly thinking to yourself, even if I'm having a really rubbish time, I've maybe helped someone else who might have been having a really rubbish day. And, even the recognition afterwards, not that you do it for that at all, but when people say, that was really kind of you, you didn't have to do that, and you think, well, no, I didn't, but that was a choice I made. I wanted to do that, and it always makes you feel better when you do.
It's a shame you didn't bring the sausage rolls today, though.
Yeah, no, I suddenly realised when I said it then, I was like, God, I've made a mistake here.
And what you talked about the example of like making things for your team, giving them time. Do you do any volunteering work, for example? Do you work with any charities?
Yeah, so I work alongside 2 other charities as sort of like a support role in my spare time. So I work with they're both youth mental health based. So there's Lumi, which is a new startup, which is absolutely amazing, run by Dr. Mark Cox, really cool guy. Incredible sort of work that he's doing towards all of that, sort of going into schools, doing pilots, starting in January. So hopefully when this is released, we've got a bit more news on all of that. So I would recommend checking that out. And then I also work with the Jasmine Foundation, which is a charity based in Scotland. That's my friend who passed away when I was 14. It's just run by her mum and dad. Again, really amazing, really incredible cause. So it's something I'm so passionate about, mental health as a whole. So having these opportunities to work with these charities that align so incredibly well with my own sort of values and beliefs, I think is really important. And it's nice because you have that sense of community as well. You know, you don't work with a charity for free unless you're interested in it. So everyone I'm speaking to is just as invested as I am, which is really lovely, because often I get worried that I waffle on a bit, as I may be doing today. Sorry, everyone. But it's lovely to have that sort of space where, you know, everyone's got that shared, you know, drive, that shared goal and aim that keeps changing and getting bigger and better and more incredible. So yeah, it's how I'm excited to see what happens in the future with it all.
You talked about how important it was that your parents took notice of the situation, and you had that conversation, and how it was amazing for your parents to tell you how proud they are of you. One of the 5 ways to wellbeing is take notice. So it's like when you're able to, it says here, like, savor the moment. Savoring the moment can help you feel more positive about life. So it might be taking notice of another person, a bit like you felt your parents did with you. For me, it's like I love going hiking in the mountains, and that is when I feel most at peace, because I feel disconnected from technology, other than my phone that's playing music. So
Yeah.
I'm not exactly off the grid.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah, understood.
But how do you take notice? Like, how do you make time for that?
Yeah, interesting one. I think if you were to ask me 6 months ago, I would have rarely have said, yeah, taking notice is something that's super important to me, that I do frequently. I think now that I'm able to kind of reflect in the moments of certain situations, or reflect on certain challenges or issues, it's made me more aware of the moment, you know. When I think about, like, personal life, for example, every time I have alone time with my daughter, it's just me and her, daddy-daughter day, I'm literally reflecting as I look at her. I'm taking notice of everything she's doing. And just doing that for like 30 seconds, I don't know if it's, I mean, it probably is because, you know, she's my daughter and I'm seeing her grow, but being able to focus on her in that moment and reflect on how far she's come, it fills me with happiness, you know, a lot of happiness.
Most of my resentments in life or my fears, they exist in the past, or they exist in the future. But very, 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 very rarely do they exist in the present. You know, very rarely is there anything I'm immediately afraid of or immediately resentful of. There are times when I am full of anger, and sometimes when I am full of fear.
Yeah.
But I share that because what you described in your relationship with your daughter, in terms of feeling great when you take notice, is that you are completely in the present when you're with her, and let's say anything that might cause worry and therefore stress, maybe leads to anxiety, is completely absent from the situation. And it sounds like your time with Lana is like the time when I'm hiking.
Yeah. I mean, kind of. It does get a bit crazy when she's going off on one. But yeah, no, it definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong, the anxiety comes after when I'm thinking, oh, you've grown so fast, what the next 5 years going to be like. But no, certainly, man. It's just being able to be present in the moment. You know, it's indescribable. And that's just the personal kind of perspective on taking notice, you know. At work, we link, if we link it back to, connecting, I take notice of, I took notice of your beef goulash recipe today, but it's those things that I think all of these, these 5 ways of well-being interconnect in some way or fashion. So it's great.
Doesn't quite feel like work, does it? When you change up the environment and you change the way that you approach it, I feel like it doesn't quite feel like work, because you're just doing it that differently to what the normal is. And
I think actually that is the solution for mental health issues in the workplace, is for people to be the same at home as they are in work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's obviously slight variations. No one's going to be exactly the same. But we go back, you mentioned earlier about our first ever chat.
yes,
That chat would have happened whether we met socially or whether we met in a work environment.
yeah,
And lo and behold, that's led to us doing this podcast, you see.
yeah.
So just a little bit of showing a bit of vulnerability, a bit of transparency can lead to doing good things for others. And it certainly helped my mental health. And also, I would say it's probably been good for business too. I always put that forward, that
Yeah.
there's showing vulnerability in sales and authenticity is actually what buyers most appreciate. I don't think they really like the traditional salesperson stereotype.
No, I feel like I'm a strong believer actually in that people buy from people, and you've got to be authentic. You've got to be your true self. I was reading a book recently, and it talks around. It's called True North, and it talks around being your true self and finding your true north, and really committing to that, no matter what situation or environment you're in. Never steering away from that, because ultimately it talks about also if you go into each different relationship as a different person, for example, your mind is managing so much and flipping from environment about how it needs to be and how it needs to act, and it's not sustainable, and it's not healthy. So you always need to have that true north, which is the core of who you are. And as a salesperson, for example, you do have to adapt the way you approach things depending on what that meeting is, what the task is, what you're pitching and things like that. And I completely get that. But always at the root of that should be the core of who you are. And I really do believe in that. I speak about it a lot to a lot of people. And I actually ask the question sometimes to members of my indirect teams, and I say, is this you? Are you being you? And it opens up some conversations, which some are quite difficult, because if someone, like you said, if someone is a bit closed off and they're struggling, but they're closing that off from the world and from the work environment, we spend a lot of our time in the work environment. People always say separate personal and work. And I don't think you can quite do that. You spend half of your time at your workplace with your colleagues. You need to be comfortable to let that crossover happen. Not so much so that it largely affects your day, for example, but just having that vulnerability and confidence that you can open up about it. And I've had it recently where people are not bringing themselves to work. They're bringing a person that they feel like they have to be in order to actually hide some, quite difficult and challenging things that they were going through at the time. And we spoke about that. And I'd like to think the person has said that, they feel much better coming into work now, because they don't feel like they're having to be this sort of fake persona. And they said it's helped them a lot, and again, that's one person, but that person may come into that similar situation with someone else in the future, and hopefully they'll look back at how our interaction happened, and then they'll try and breathe that forward to that person and then help that person. That's the hope.
Why would you recommend yoga to a salesperson?
So I think obviously sales is a very sort of high caliber job. You've got KPIs to hit, you've got targets to meet, you've got, colleagues to compete with. It's an insanely high-paced job, at least from my experience so far. I think I'd recommend yoga because it's all about, it's not high intensity. You know, you're not going to catch me in the gym doing a HIIT workout, you know, where it just looks like everyone's crazy, super amounts of energy. I think yoga's fab because it's about matching movement with your breathing. So it's all about being very intentional and very slow and having that kind of practice to, you know, even if you're just lying on the mat for 30 seconds and it's just about being present with your body, sort of tapping back into, you know, how you're feeling. It's like talking about my journaling earlier. It's very similar. I think having that moment just purely to yourself, not to be selfish, but sometimes you do need that time to sort of, is it introspective? Like when you look in, is that the right word?
Introspective would be like self-reflection.
Yes, yeah. So it's kind of like that, I suppose. And I think that's why I'd recommend it to salespeople, because it's very slow, it's very, you know, it's got a purpose and there's a reason to do each of the moves you decide to do. And, you know, you can do it for back pain or whatever if you fancy, but I just sort of do the one that I like the most at the moment. And
if you drew parallels then between being introspective or taking time to pause, and drew some parallels between that and sales, why would that behaviour be good for a salesperson?
Well, I think it's important because with sales you're making a lot of potentially very important decisions a day. You know, if I'm speaking to a client, I need to be able to listen to what they're saying really carefully, pick up on any pain points they might have to then be able to potentially help them and offer them a solution, you know, instead of maybe sort of jumping the gun and wanting to say, oh, I've got exactly what you need. Because the reality is you probably don't, you know, unless you've really had a good chat on with them and you've been talking for, you know, yonks. You're probably just sort of getting a bit overexcited. So I think it's important to have that level of stillness. I think that would be the right way to put it. Yeah, stillness. So that you can sit and properly sort of tune into what they're saying and listen to the way that they say things. You know, if someone says, oh, well, we've just got a new IT provider. Or if someone says, oh, well, we've just got a new IT provider. You know, I could listen to both of those and not hear the difference if I didn't take the time to actually properly listen, I suppose. And it's about doing that and, yeah, having that sort of quietness and stillness. And sometimes the power of silence in sales is so important. You know, letting someone speak, as I think you're doing quite well at the moment. You know, letting someone speak, because sometimes, you know, a problem will unravel itself in that moment.
My whole life has been about collaboration and you know, talking to other people, and the reason I'm in the position that I'm in is because of talking to people and being personable. So I think I watched a podcast I listened to a podcast the other day, and it was about being vulnerable around people, especially in leadership roles. And I think vulnerability is a really important thing because people don't then expect the world of you, and then your expectations in turn aren't constantly being pushed in your head, and you know, the snowball effect.
And do you find that you create a more trusted environment by showing your vulnerability? Are people able to trust you more?
I think so, and that is really recent as well, to be honest. That's kind of moving into managerial roles, and that vulnerability helps all of us. I think it helps all of us because firstly, it shows you're human and it enables people to and allows people to open up back to you as well. But it also, I just think it instantly puts everybody in a more comfortable space. For me, workplaces that are more open and more porous and more less individualistic have always been more successful in my career.
And do you think that vulnerability is a trait as a salesperson that can lead to great success?
100%. All of our customer interactions, I think as soon as you start turning off the this is a customer face, and I say this to all of my sales staff as well, because especially kind of younger individuals, and I don't want to stereotype younger individuals, but we all come in and we fear this customer. This customer is like an illustrious person that we're going after and we're trying to target. And all the words we use in sales are really strange as well. It is like targeting someone. But realistically, you're offering a consultancy, you're offering a service that they need anyway. So being friendly, learning about their lives, learning about the way they work is actually not just good for sales, but it's hugely socially, it just makes you more comfortable. And I think it's a point we're going to talk about as well on the connect side of things. It's so much easier to deliver good news, bad news, to ask for things, to talk to customers when you're open and you're vulnerable. And I think vulnerable as well, especially over the last couple of years, has become less of a taboo word. Before, when you were vulnerable, you were seen as small and little, and you couldn't make an impact. But actually, some of the people I've worked with and the most powerful people and my mentors are all extremely vulnerable with me, and I'll know intricate details about how they're feeling and what makes them tick.